And that's not the only case of brutality and recklessness that we're hearing about today. A few hours north of Los Angeles, a U.S. district judge has ruled that police officers must face excessive force claims coming from Occupy Oakland. The protesters claimed that police used unusually harsh tactics to disperse a peaceful group of activists who were speaking out against tuition hikes at the University of California in Berkeley. The Berkeley police used their batons to beat protesters who had linked arms in order to avoid eviction. Meanwhile, in New York, Occupy activist Michael Premio was found innocent of assaulting a police officer when video evidence directly contradicted the New York Police Department's claim that he had abused the officers. Here to discuss this case of Michael Premio, I'm joined now by Molly Neffel, a journalist at Radio Dispatch. Hey there, Molly. So what did the video evidence ultimately clear him of, and what was shown in it?
Sure. So Mr. Premio was facing a number of charges, including obstructing governmental administration, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. The officer in question had testified at the trial, claiming that Mr. Premio had used stiff arms, had resisted, and ultimately his alleged violent actions had led to the officer being injured. And when the actual tape of the arrest was played in court, it actually showed that Mr. Premio was on the ground. He had fallen down in the scuffle of the protest and had covered his head to protect himself as he was on the ground. And as he tried to stand up, was then tackled from behind by officers. There was basically no video evidence of what the police officer had testified what happened.
So quite a different story from what the NYPD prosecutors and also the officer himself was saying. Now, he was actually really lucky in this case that there was, in fact, video evidence to disprove what the officer and the prosecution were saying, but that's not obviously always the case. Do you get the sense that the NYPD lying on the stand is actually common practice, or is this just an isolated incident?
Well, there was another Occupy case that happened earlier the past year involving a man named Mr. Arbuckle, and that was also a case where the police testimony contradicted the video evidence. There had been a police officer testifying that the defendant had been in the street obstructing vehicular traffic, I believe, and the video evidence showed that that wasn't where the defendant was standing. So it's important to note that that while Mr. Premio was found not guilty, because there was this video, meanwhile, there are, hundreds more Occupy cases and certainly thousands of cases where there is no video. And an important case, regarding police brutality would be Jatik Reed, who was arrested last year by the NYPD and violently beaten by them while handcuffed. And because there was video evidence showing what happened, the NYPD ultimately dismissed what he was being charged with. But there was a number of discrepancies between the police report and the video. So
Sure.
I can't speculate as to how often it happens, but it certainly as Michelle Alexander has written in the New York Times, in a jury trial, if you have a police officer testifying, the jury might not have any reason not to believe that police officer's testimony if there's not video evidence there to show
Molly,
the police officer.
that was going to be my question to you, is do you think a jury is more likely to believe a police officer than a regular citizen, and do you think that should be the case? Should we just believe what we're being told?
Well, you were talking about the LAPD earlier, and the Rodney King video was so so groundbreaking because finally here is video, and I think a lot of people in the communities of color in LA at that time were not surprised to see that video because they knew that was what was happening in their communities. And so in terms of a jury, I think it depends on the jury, but as Michelle Alexander's written, if you have a police officer on the one hand and a defendant on the other hand that is being discredited for a number of reasons, maybe he's being discredited because he's an activist, or an Occupy person, against which there's this big smear campaign, or maybe he's a young man of color, and the jury, there might be all sorts of reasons regarding, cultural biases or media representations that the jury might be more likely to believe the police officer than the defendant. But I think
Sure.
that Mr. Primo's case is important because it shows that that's not always accurate.
And we just have a little bit of time, Molly, but I have to ask you, do you expect to see more video evidence used against police officers as a check on their power in the future?
Well, it certainly has, I think, a great deal of potential to change the way the trials go. You know, people have smartphones now. More people have access to video and photos than ever before. The NYCLU has an app that if you witness a stop and frisk happening, you can videotape it. So I think that that video will hopefully, if there's video available, as Mr. Primo's trial showed, it can serve as a force to counteract the power of the police.
And of course, videotaping police is legal in all but 2 states, so we'll have to see how this plays out in other cases dealing with Occupy. Molly Neifel, journalist at Radio Dispatch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.